I'm Rico Cavella, and this is your Ageless Body Self-Care Guide, Operations Manual for your body and for your mind. And the title of today's session is Toxicology, all about all the toxins that we are exposed to every day and how dangerous they are to our health and what you need to know about them and what you need to know how you can help to avoid toxicity in your body and how to eliminate some of that toxicity. So we're very fortunate to have a great expert and teacher with us today. His name is Dr. Joe Nuzma, and Dr. Joe is CEO of Superior Toxicology and Wellness. It's an international scientific consulting firm, and he has been a toxicology researcher for over 30 years. So Dr. Joe, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Rico, for having me. Appreciate the invite and ready to try to educate the public and your listeners on toxicology.
Yeah, that's so important. It's such an important topic. So thanks for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. So let's get right into it. Let's start by, how about just defining, give us a good definition of toxicology.
Well, toxicology is really the study of poisons. And you can lump a lot of things into that category. Toxicology is really all about how substances that aren't supposed to be in the body, the fancy word for that is xenobiotics, interact with the body. So toxicology is based on all of the sciences. You know, you need pharmacology, and you need anatomy and physiology, and you need pathology and pathophysiology. You need to understand all these, and biochemistry. And it takes the best of all the rest and formulates toxicology, which is really the study of poisons, anything that's not supposed to be in the body, and how it disrupts how the body operates on a normal everyday basis. And you know, one of the biggest mantras of toxicology is the dose makes the poison. And what does that mean? I mean, the dose makes the poison is basically a substance that is exquisitely toxic can be harmless in a small enough dose, or a substance that is absolutely harmless can be very toxic in a large enough dose. For instance, cyanide. Everybody knows that cyanide is a respiratory toxin and it'll kill you. You know, all the spy movies had the cyanide capsule that the agent, when he's captured, bites down on it, and all of a sudden he's dead, and you lose the chance to beat the mess out of him and get your intelligence. But cyanide can also be very non-toxic in smaller doses. And the other side of the spectrum, think about water. You know, water is the universal solvent, the solvent of life. Without water, there is no life. And yet, if there's too much water, you can dilute your electrolytes and mess up your cellular biochemistry. And drug of abuse, ecstasy, one of its main mechanisms of action of toxicity is water toxicity. And the reason for that is that it triggers a reaction in your brain to make you think you're thirsty, and it never goes away. So these kids, because the drug is mostly popular in our younger population, drink themselves to death on water. Wow. In this toxic reaction with ecstasy on board. And then they lose cellular communication and function, and water actually kills them.
I just wanted to add on your point about the dose. That's kind of what the difference is between pharmaceutical drugs and homeopathy. It's really about the dose, right? That's an important point. Well, tell us about, give us an overview of all the different toxins that we're exposed to. I know we come from the air and the water and food and building materials. So talk about that.
To follow up on your comment between homeopathy approaches and drugs, small molecule approaches, what most people don't realize is that the small molecule drugs, most of those compounds have an origin in natural products. And the Western physicians that know only their drug products and prescriptions coming from the big pharma, and they ignore the centuries of experience in the Far Eastern medicine that's all natural product based, is really missing a large part of what they could be practicing. So it is the dose. It is the dose makes the poison, or the dose makes the therapeutic. because those drug products that people take on a regular basis for a whole host of conditions, there's a dose response curve, and it's an S-shaped curve. The x-axis is response, the y-axis is dose, and the response, up into a point, it's a good thing. That's the therapeutic effect. But then as the dose goes up, you're going to get adverse effects, and that's the dose response curve. And
Right.
but drugs is only one of the toxins, Rico.
Right.
I mean, like you said, they come in. They come in from air. They come in from water. They come in from food, and all of these toxins have a primary purpose of disrupting normal cellular physiology. And when you're talking about toxins, and you're talking about the ones that come in via different routes of exposure, the final effect is still going to be part of disrupting cellular physiology. So the whole name of the game is to protect your cells and make sure your cells are healthy. Because if cells are healthy, tissues will be healthy. If tissues are healthy, organs will be healthy. And if organs are healthy, humans will be healthy.
Isn't
And
it,
then,
excuse me, I just want to say, isn't it a matter of accumulation as well? I know people say, well, if I just eat this one thing, it's got a lot of preservatives and chemicals and all these things in it, or dyes, and if I just do this one time and drink this, it's okay, but it's a cumulative effect, right?
exactly. Because toxicology is a whole picture approach. And you're exposed to pharmaceuticals. If you're on a whole host of stuff, it's a whole host of stuff. Over the counters and prescriptions, you're exposed to pollutants in the air. As you breathe the air, obviously someone who lives in a urban environment has poorer air quality than somebody who lives in the suburbs or the country. And those pollutants that are in the air comes from automobiles, comes from industrial processes, comes from some natural sources. Like out here where I live in the Front Range of Colorado, the background exposure to uranium is higher in Colorado there than it is in the rest of the country, because there's uranium in the mountains. So it's a natural products exposure. And that's dependent on where you live. Out in San Diego, where you are, maybe one of the factors that's you're exposed to is sunshine, UV rays. And then depending upon like heavy metal content, and you can get that in your water supply. They add a couple of them. They add fluoride and they add chlorine. And these things are in your water supply based on the source of the water supply. There's a whole host of different organics. And in some cases, if the chlorine is in there in excess, and there's free chlorine available to combine with the organics that are in the water, you get what's known as disinfection byproducts. The poster child of that is trihalomethanes or haloacetic acids, but it's always the halogen. That's the column in the periodic table that starts with chlorine, and you have chlorine and bromine and a couple other ones that are just the nasty things that when that chlorine combines with the organics that's naturally there in the water, and you get the trihalomethanes, over time, that's carcinogenic for sure in animals and most likely in humans, since we're an animal.
So what would you say what do you recommend as far as to
For
purify
water?
in order to purify your water? Yeah.
Sure. There's lots of different things you can do. At a city's section of a city, you can pull the chlorine out and use a different type of a product. It's a chlorine dioxide based product. The best one on the market is called twin oxide. And you can purify your water using twin oxide, and there's no free chlorine in that compound. It kills all of your microbials, and it doesn't form those disinfection byproducts. So those disinfection byproducts go to zero and stay at zero. So that removes that carcinogenic exposure. That's one thing. And if you're exposed to 10 things every day, Rico, if you remove one of them, are you better off?
A little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're a little
exactly,
bit.
because it's a whole picture approach. And that's
So,
what you were talking about.
right.
If you just eat that Twinkie that's jam-packed with preservatives just once, you're still adding to that full spectrum of exposure. And it's what you breathe, it's what you eat, it's what you drink, it's what you're exposed to. Really, the whole process can be explained in risk. Voluntary risk versus involuntary risk. And the voluntary risk is when someone pulls out a cigarette and lights up. They are choosing to do that. That's a social habit that they are fully accepting of all the risks. And same thing with having a couple beers after work. Same thing with eating charbroiled steaks or eating a lot of processed foods. Those are all choices people consciously make. It is a risk that's voluntary. They choose it. Now, an involuntary risk is something like, well, where do you work? You work in a chemical plant, a pharmaceutical plant, a tire plant, and or you pave roads for a living, or you're exposed to a lot of different chemicals for, plating chemicals or fireproofing chemicals or whatever it is. Whatever it is, that is more of an involuntary risk because that's your job, and there's somebody else saying, go in there and do that. So the difference between somebody that gets lung cancer from 30 years of smoking cigarettes versus somebody that gets cancer from inhaling asbestos fibers because he used to fireproof buildings, that's two separate arguments, but it's still two exposures which result in an adverse condition in the human. And it all comes down to the risk. Did they choose to do it, or was it ordered for them to do it? And in the legal world, they're looked at differently.
Right. So what about for a home water filtration system? What do you recommend?
The best one, the home water filtration, the most cost effective is you just go to Walmart or Target or any of your big box stores, or even Amazon, I guess, and order the zero water filter. The zero water filter, you can get, it's a pitcher with a filter at the top, and I think it's a 7-stage filter. So it takes out more than like a Brita filter, which is just activated carbon. Right. And the fridge filters is also just activated carbon. They do okay. They take out a lot of the bad taste and stuff in your water, and you can taste the difference from tap water to the fridge filter to the Brita to the zero water. Zero water costs probably $35 to $45 depending upon the size of the pitcher you buy. And it takes out the chlorine, it takes out the fluoride, it takes out the heavy metals, and it takes out a lot more than just activated carbon. It also sends a total dissolved solid meter with every purchase. So you test your water after a while, and as your total dissolved solids go back up, it's time to replace the filter. I have a zero water filter in my fridge, and you just fill it up with tap water, and then you drink the water out of the zero water filter. So that's the one that I would recommend. If it beats having a big old honking thing tied up to your faucet, and it's cleaner, it's cheaper, it's easier to use. Well, anybody can do it.
Yeah, that's some really good information. So I think the whole message here is that we know that there's just toxins coming to us from all different areas of our life. So important. So first of all, it's important to know that, understand that, know that it is cumulative, and that you need to do the best you can to avoid some of these.
And you can do something for air too. Yeah. I mean, there's those the air purifiers that are on the market. Some of the best ones that I've seen are it's either by a company called Valera or EcoQuest, and it's called a fresh air, and it's an ionizer and it's an ozonator. So it gets the ions combined with particles, and when you have this in your house, you see more dust because the ions combine with the particles and they fall down and hit a flat surface. But all of those particles that have been weighted down by ions and come out of the air, you're not breathing. So your lungs aren't your air purifier. It's that machine, and then it also sends out reactive oxygen species, which kills all the microbes. Right. So yeah, if you have a water filter and you have an air purifier, you're eliminating a lot of the stuff that you have been asking your body to take care of for you. And your body, as it's breathing those impurities and drinking those impurities and eating those impurities, what you're doing is creating chronic inflammation.
Right.
And that chronic inflammation is something that your body has to fight. It's oxidative stress. All of this stuff, and your body creates enough of that on its own because oxygen radicals are a side effect of breathing. Mm-hmm. Your cells aren't 100% efficient. So when you breathe and the oxygen gets to your cells, and it takes other cofactors from the biochemistry of normal existence to create the energy in the mitochondria, that also kicks out some active oxygen species, your hydroxyl radical, your hydrogen peroxide, all those types of things. And those are little assassins in your cells that go after critical pieces of biochemistry, enzymes, proteins, cellular membranes, DNA, RNA. All of these things are susceptible to attack by oxygen radicals. And the other thing that the last time I was on the show, I mentioned it extensively, was carbon 60. That's the world's best antioxidant, and the best form of that is in C60 Complete by Live Longer Labs. And you can get that at purebellavita.com. When you have C60 on board, basically what you're doing is you're giving your body a huge tool to squelch oxidative stress. And then when your body doesn't have to do that daily battle with oxidative stress from all the rest of the impurities, the whole spectrum of stuff we're exposed to, it has a whole bucket of resources to put towards healing. Because when your body has the resources, your body heals. It's designed to live, over 100 years easy. Yeah. And when you give it the proper nutrition, the proper hydration, the proper rest, the proper mindful connection to the collective consciousness, all of these things come into play to contribute to how you age. And it really slows down the pace, but you have to do it. You have to take care of the water. You have to take care of the air.
You got a little bit.
Have to have that C60 complete.
You got a little bit ahead of me there. Yeah, that's kind of be the last thing is.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. What are the top 3 or 4 things that you can do right now to make a difference? And then also a little bit about how to detoxify your body. But before we get to that, talk a little bit. I know this is one of your one of your passions. Talk a little bit about the dangers of prescription drugs.
Oh, yeah, I can do that.
And their toxicity, yeah.
Sure. Prescription drugs are really kind of a fickle mistress, if you will, Rico, because we take these drugs for one specific purpose, and every single one of them has other things that it does. If you've ever listened to a commercial on TV and all of that fast talk that nobody can understand, that's the bad stuff that happens. Right. And if anybody actually read the pamphlet that the pharmacist sends out on their prescription, who would take that stuff?
I know.
I mean, it's that simple. For instance, it's like the statins. The statins are what, when you get fat and lazy and decide to stop walking around the block and you eat a bag of chips and watch TV instead of taking the dog around the block. It's the statins is when you're pre-diabetic. Your doctor's like, oh, you're pre-diabetic. We need to get in front of this. We're going to throw you on a statin. What they don't tell you is the statins will trash your liver. And the statins will trash your skeletal muscles. And as the statins are breaking down your skeletal muscles and dumping proteinaceous material into your bloodstream, and they send that to the kidneys are trying like hell to filter out all of that proteinaceous material, and you start to trash your kidneys. And you can avoid all of that by not eating the bag of chips, maybe just have a little bit of them, and keep walking around the block. Right. The other one is like antidepressants, Prozac. Half the world is on Prozac. And, do we really need all that alterations in brain chemistry? The best natural antidepressant, and every single time I do a hope evaluation for people, I make this recommendation. If you're on an antidepressant, buy a dog, buy a puppy, because then you have another sentient soul that you're responsible for, that adores you, and that wants to go for a walk, so you have a reason to get off the couch. And most people that buy that dog can get off of their antidepressant. It's amazing.
Yeah, that's so good, Joe. But also the other big thing for antidepressant is to exercise. Yeah. Nothing can make you change your mood and feel better and get those endorphins going.
Exactly.
Go out and get off your butt and exercise.
And one of the easiest things you can do, Rico, if exercise hasn't been your thing for 40 years, when you're sitting on the couch and you get up, what you should do is sit back down and get up, and sit back down and get up, and see if you can build up to 100 body weight squats a day over the course of the day, not at once, and do that for a month. I guarantee you, you're going to see a body transformation in your legs, in your abs, in your back, just from getting up and sitting down, getting up and sitting down. If you do it 10 times a day, you're going to make that goal. Track it. Because if you don't track it, you're not doing it.
That's such good advice, because I know you've heard the saying that sitting is the new smoking. We know how bad sitting is for you.
God.
And so if you'll take that advice, what I tell people, get up every 30 minutes and do some movement. Or you could do, like you say, get up and down, do some stretching, do some walking.
Several years ago, I guess probably 15 years ago, I had a 1991 GMC pickup. And I went out and I bought a different car. So that 1991 GMC pickup just kind of sat on the road beside the house while I was driving the other car around. You know what happens to that pickup when it sits? The gaskets dry up and start to leak. And the fluids kind of get a little bit more solid and don't flow right.
Yeah, sticky.
And if you only start it and drive it once a month, it's not going to work right. You know what's very similar to when you let cars sit is when you let your body sit. It's exactly the same thing, Rico.
That's a really good analogy.
One of the other things that I'm going to tell you, kind of a personal story. It's somebody that's close in my family, and he was on. Let's say he's already outlived where his dad died of cardiovascular issues, and he was on 2 different drugs for blood pressure. And now all of a sudden he goes back in and they tell him that his ventricular ejection fraction is only 20%. He has congestive heart failure. But he was on these blood pressure drugs because they thought he was going to have high blood pressure because his dad did. The blood pressure drug that they put him on was a calcium channel antagonist. And guess what? The side effect of that blood pressure drug causes congestive heart failure. So one drug they have him on to help something is destroying one of the major organs you need to live, your heart. Now, all of a sudden, they find out that his ejection fraction is very low, 20% of what it should be. So they've taken him off of that drug. Now, whose fault is that? Is that the patient that's listening to the doctor? Or is that the doctor that put him on a drug that wrecked another one of his organs? Yeah. It's one of those gray areas, Rico, but that's why you need to be your own best advocate. And with pharmaceuticals in particular, if you don't understand what's going on, you need to talk to me, because I help people in that exact situation that are on multiple drug products. It's called the HOPE program, and we talked about it last time. Health, optimization, prescription evaluation. And I'll tell you what, as part of this training, I'll give people a special.
Yeah. I want to remind people that all these video trainings, and when you're watching here with Dr. Joe, it comes with a PDF and has all that information, how you can contact Dr. Joe and get any gifts he has, or any kind of his books, or any kind of any kind of a coaching. Yeah. So that's a good thing to do. So I think the big thing we need to sum up here with prescription drugs is, yes, they have their value. In acute situation, they can save your life. Absolutely. But for most chronic situations, they're down. Not only do they do not really solve the problem, but they're downright dangerous.
They're insidious. Absolutely.
Yeah,
and that's just a fancy word for saying that damage creeps up on you.
Right. And that's one of the big toxins you got to watch out for. Okay. So down to the last thing here, Joe. Tell us, I think you've already have about probably the air filter and the water filter, but aside from those two, maybe give us two or three more things that people could do right now, start right now, to help really avoid some of the most dangerous toxins.
My favorite mantra on diet is eat half and mostly plants, and you're going to be fine. Yeah. Because when you do that, you're avoiding, you're avoiding all of the processed foods. You're avoiding all of those additives and preservatives, and that's eliminating a huge toxin right from your diet. So you got the air purifier, you got the water purifier, you're watching your diet, and then you can't stop moving. The exercise cannot be underestimated. And find something you like to do and just do it. If it's walking around the block, great. If it's riding your bike around the block, great. If it's buying the puppy and walking them around the block, great. If it's scuba diving, go do that. If it's skydiving, go do it. If it's playing golf, but you got to do it.
Got to
And
do it.
you just
That's the
gotta
message.
do it. You know, buy that Apple Watch and it tells you how many steps you take and what your heart rate is. It's really kind of funny because my absolute best friend in the world, his wife has an Apple Watch, and she's been a runner her whole life, and she swims and just, you know, she just does what she needs to do to be fit. Her resting heart rate was in the low 50s, and the Apple Watch actually asked her if she was okay because her pulse was so low and
Yeah.
she's so fit. But there's tools out there. You can go high tech, you can go low tech,
Right.
but
Let me ask you what your opinion on doing some regular detoxification programs.
I think that if it fits somebody's spectrum and profile, absolutely do it.
Okay.
And there's a company that I've written a lot of safety data sheets and know about their products. It's called Quicksilver, and
Okay.
you can go to Quicksilver online,
Check them out
and
too.
they have several different detoxification kits. Actually, their very first product was a heavy metal detoxification kit, and you can buy them with the instructions and exactly how to do it. And people would be absolutely amazed at how much bad stuff you can pull out of the body. Because
Yeah.
I mean, one of my other examples is like the body is like a dry sponge with water, which is your toxins, your exposures, your insults dripping into that sponge, and it absorbs it as long as it can until there's no more room, and then it starts dripping out the side. And a detoxification protocol is exactly like taking that sponge and squeezing it, and then you get all of that stuff running out of the sponge, and that's going to be what a detoxification protocol does for somebody. And there's lots of them on the market. You have to find the one that works for you. They're all different. They're all slightly different, but the same effect is they're chelating protocols. And that means they're putting in a substance, usually it's some sort of earthen material, clay or something along those lines, that will grab these heavy metals out of your body, and then it's eliminated usually through your feces. And there's some electrolysis stuff where the fancy spa treatments, you can put your water in this, or your feet in this water that's kind of electrolyzed, and the water turns black. The black stuff
Yeah.
comes out of the bottom of your feet.
Yeah.
So I think it's very good, because what you're doing, you're squeezing the sponge and giving your body more capacity to absorb the stuff that you're exposed to every day. You can avoid a lot of it, but you can't avoid all of it. So you have to find a way to manage it. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Makes sense. Thanks, Joe. Thank you so much. I mean, you're so full of information. I have to slow you down a little bit sometimes.
I'm sorry.
I know you got so much stuff to say. It's so good. And we do have some other experts that are talking about detoxification as well.
Oh, good.
So it's a really important thing. Okay, so my very last question that I have to ask all my experts, and it's the hardest one to answer, but what ideas do you have to maybe to help inspire and motivate people to actually take actions on your recommendations?
It's a process. The very first step of a long journey is that first step. What you need to do is personally find the way to overcome your personal inertia. Take the first step, and then realize that your body is a lot stronger than your mind. And do not let the weakness of your mind overcome the potential of your strong body. Take that step, take the next step, take the next step, and keep walking once you are walking. General Patton said it best. The body is strong, the mind is weak. Train the mind, train the soldier, keep marching.
That's so good, Joe. Thank you so much. And that's it. So to sum up this whole thing, we know we live in a toxic environment, so you really need to, get educated. We're educating you on that subject of how to care for your body. And so it's just so important if you really want to have great health and energy
Absolutely.
all your life. And again, this whole project, that's what this is about, is helping you to be as healthy and as energetic as you and live as long as you can, so you can use your talents and abilities to go out and make it a better world for us all. That's the whole thing. So Dr. Joe, again, thanks so much. That was great.
Thanks for having me. And people can find me, just Google Dr. Joe for
Yeah.
Hope, and you'll find everything I talk about. And it's great to help and be part of the solution, Rico. I appreciate the invitation.
Thank you so much.